What's going on? What's going on? Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's a live drive. This is Delicate Virgin up the Rio Spiel. I'll wait for some of y'all to jump in here. Let's have a conversation this morning about family business. For those that will catch this later, I need you to go back and look at some of the videos I posted late last night. I know my demographic. Grace and peace, Second Exodus. I know my demographic. I got the mamas and the papas and the pop-pops. I know you folks go to bed after 9 o'clock. I know. So anything I post after 9 o'clock, you're not going to see it till the morning. Most of us are getting up, going to work. Most of y'all shutting down about 10 o'clock. I know. Putting them kids to bed, grandkids to bed. Well, you're just tired. So I understand. But go back and take a look. I posted something, a poem contextualized of The White Man's Burden, written by Rudyard Kipling. I think it's very interesting to see the evolution of whiteness, and it's important. Blessings to everybody this morning. But let's have a conversation. I call this family business. Family business. When dealing with the religions of Afro-Semitic and Afro-Hamitic people, most ancient religions. Good afternoon from the UK. When dealing with those religions, it has always been a conversation about race. And I know that many European white Christians are tired of this conversation. But I'm going to ask you to listen for a minute, because it's very relevant to the time that we're in. The Christian of the 60s, the civil rights movement, was anxiously trying to get over the conversation of race, because in Christianity, God, who is extremely race-oriented in the Old Testament, extremely race-oriented, that I will prove, God stopped the race war. In the Christian ethos, God stopped the race war. As you will see coming in, most of you will see a picture of Saint Moses the Black. That's not Moses of antiquity of the Old Testament. That is Moses of the 5th century, a martyr of the church. But God solved the race problem in Christianity. And the Christian now could look at his brother, whether he be Jew or Gentile, and say the race war is now over. So it was very easy for black people of the 60s, in respect to the civil rights movement, to not have to wrestle with the issue of race, because race was no longer on the table for the Christian church. But the problem with race not being on the table, and race not being the issue from the perspective of the Afro-Hamitic, Afro-Semitic person for Christianity, other individuals moved into that space and said, since it's not on the table for you, let us go back and put ourselves in those racialized roles and say that it is us. That's the problem. That when the black Christian abandoned true ancestral accuracy because dogmatically we did not require it, other characters moved into that space and said, since you don't care what race those people were, we will assume that role, and we will be that race. So let's go back to the Old Testament and start having a conversation about race. The race becomes a real conversation, really typified in Abraham. We could talk about Noah's sons, but that's an old false doctrine that I don't want to unravel right now, because It is a doctrine from the perspective of bias. And if you go back, it is a white man's burden mentality that started with the conversation of Noah, where Noah curses Canaan. He can't curse Ham, but he curses Canaan, the sons of Ham. But I don't want to go back to that, because that becomes a conversation that is different. But let's start with Abraham. Good morning to everybody. Great to see everybody. As people pop in and I keep looking at the road and looking at you, I will greet you properly. All my fire members, all my wind members, my earth members. Woo! Earth, it's strong, boy. The earth members are coming in powerful, powerful, powerful. I've got membership videos in there. Fire people, your membership videos in there. The spirit people, you should have got your book. Wind people, I still do not have your businesses. And sometimes I want to break protocol, but I've been told to do it one way. If you got to get into my Instagram, but please go and fill in the stay up to date. That will get our emails, capture emails. God bless you this morning. We are mixed with the Canaanite, the Palestinian. We'll talk about it. Good morning, Miss Ann. Good to see you, Miss Ann. Miss Ann reposts all my stuff, you guys. Miss Ann got me going around the world. Miss Ann be posting all the videos, and she reposts it. And this, Miss Ann, this is for you, because Miss Ann is always trying to post things that are faith-based. She's a woman of faith. And Miss Ann, this is for you. When you repost this, I want everybody to hear it. I was inspired by Miss Ann this morning to make sure I posted a little Bible study, a little ancestral Bible study for Miss Ann. So Abraham really isn't doing much until he goes to Egypt. Right? Now let me say it better. A black Semitic man isn't really doing much, even though God has called him to find the place that he says that he will cause to be his, and he leaves his ancestral home of Ur of the Chaldees. He crosses over the Euphrates, and when he crosses over the Euphrates, he is referred to as a stranger. The word Hebrew that we say now, that word only means stranger. He is a stranger to those on the other side of the Euphrates River. That's what the terminology. Abraham the Hebrew is not an ethnicity. It is simply a nickname that he's a stranger. And the Hebrew, that is what you are. You are a stranger in the land. And that's what the word meant. Abraham's ethnicity is he is Shemitic. That's his ethnicity. But they called him a Hebrew, which essentially means he's a stranger. So this Afro-Semitic man crosses the Euphrates, right? And of course, there would be traditions, there would be language differences or dialect differences, probably dialect more than language, but there's also language differences. There is a scholastic differences in respect to how words are written. We know Egyptian writings are much different than some of our Aramaic writings, and how they pen things are very different. There's a cultural difference of black peoples. So there's an Afro-Semitic, or if you will, a black Semitic man who crosses into an Afro-Hamitic, a black Hamitic country. He goes to Africa, right? It says you're coming and going. Am I coming and going? I'm sorry if the video is not good. The wandering Arameans. Okay. Hebrew means son of what? No, Hebrew does not mean that. Hebrew means stranger. Look it up yourself. These things are easy now. You don't gotta believe one crazy guy talking in his car. Hebrew means stranger. That's what the word actually means. It means stranger. That's what they refer to him as, the stranger. Abraham the Hebrew, stranger. So he crosses over, he goes into an Afro-Hamitic country, and he's extremely nervous. And he says to his wife, listen, man, they might kill me if I go over there. And we know the story. He goes in there. His wife is taken captive in respect to, he says she's his sister. The Pharaoh of the time likes her, wants her to be his wife, and God stops the whole process, right? He gives him a dream, says you have the prophet's wife, release her, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't get released. He doesn't get released. She does not get released with nothing. God opens up the treasure chest of Africa. and releases this Afro-Semitic man with African wealth, with Egyptian wealth. He leaves with gold, he leaves with slaves, right? Or servants, some would say. But he does. He leaves with slaves, he leaves with servants, he leaves with possessions, right? You have an African king releasing possessions to an Afro-Semitic prophet, and he now walks out of there with a very interesting thing. He walks out of there with an African woman by the name of Hagar as his wife's servant. And we know the story. They believe that God's intention is to make him have a child using this young African woman. And they go by the process of allowing him to have relations with this African woman, who he takes now as his wife. She's a servant that becomes his wife, his concubine wife. And now there's a great dilemma. The Afro-Semitic seed and the Afro-Hamitic seed are mixed. And Abraham says this must be God's plan. And this is what God says. He says, no, I'm not going to use, and this is where it becomes a race conversation. It becomes family business. It becomes family business of Afro-Hamitic and Afro-Semitic people. God says, I'm not going to use Ham. I'm not going to use Africa. I'm not going to use Africa. I'm going to use Shem. I'm going to use the Afro-Semitic line. And so what has taken place is that individuals who are not in that family have said this is where God rejected Africa. And has taken the white man and no. This was a conversation of family, cousins, of brothers and sisters and cousins in this scenario. Where God decides that no, I'm going through the Afro-Shemitic line. I'm not going through the Afro-Hamitic line. And Isaac now becomes the Afro-Shemitic child of promise. Ishmael, the Afro-Hamitic child that God says, I will still lift him up. I will still use him. I will still bless him. Look at the story. Doesn't reject and stop trying to acquaint Ishmael with Islam. Islam and Ishmael have nothing to do with each other. Trying to connect those dots is ridiculous. We have 4,000 BC. That's 4,000 years before Christ, Ishmael. We have 632 AD or CE, where Islam comes. There's an incredible gap between the Ishmael and Bedouin Arabs where Islam comes from. Those things are not related. I'm sorry, nation. I don't agree with that. They're not related. Ishmael is not an Arab. Stop telling people that. Look at it again. Where does Hagar come from? She is an Egyptian. She's an African. She's a black woman. Right? Who is Abraham? He's an Afro-Semitic man. How does an African woman, a black woman, and an Afro-Semitic man, a black man, have an Arab? She's not an Arab. Ishmael is not an Arab. He is part African, part Semitic. He's not an Arab at all. He has nothing to do with Arabs. So the Bedouin Arabs, where Muhammad comes from, that's Muhammad's people, the Bedouin Arabs, where Islam comes from, is not Ishmael. Let's be clear. Let's just be clear. That's not Ishmael. Okay? Okay. So we can talk about what that is, but it's definitely not Ishmael. This is family business. When we go further into the story and we get all the way to Moses, right? Let's jump 2,000 years ahead. That's what we're doing. Abraham to Moses is 2 grand. And we get into the scenario where we have an Afro-Semitic baby adopted by an Afro-Hamitic woman in the royalty paradigm of Egypt. Moses is adopted by the court of Pharaoh and raised as a Hamitic man He is raised as an African. Family business. You understand? He's raised as an African king, a prince. That's what he's raised as, an African prince. We know the story. He gets himself in a little mix-up, has to kill somebody, right? And then has to become a roadman in Midian. That's what we say in Toronto. We call them roadman. That's what I used to refer to myself as. I'm a roadman. In Trinidad. Trinidad people understand that. He becomes a roadman. He has to run for his life. He has to hang out in the streets. He has to be a regular fella. Let me read some of these comments. Hagar is a Hamitic Egyptian. Thank you. That's an African. Period. And therefore, if she's a Hamitic Egyptian, she's African. She's a black woman. She's not an Arab. And therefore, she can't have Arab children if she's not an Arab. And Abraham's not an Arab. He's an Afro-Semitic man. Yeah. So we going into family business. So now he's out there in Midian. Now he's in Midian. Now we can get into, this little Arab conversation, right? Because he's still dealing with Hamitic people. Canaanites are what? Ham, right? But Ham isn't only Africa. This is some of the things that people mix up. Ham ain't only Africa. So now Abraham is dealing with a Midianite, right? Afro-Semitic, Moses. Fix my mouth, God. Moses is dealing with a Midianite. She's dealing with Zipporah, right? He marries Jethro's daughter, Zipporah. He's out there dealing with sheep. Learns the nomadic ways. Out there till he's an old man of 80. And then God taps him on the shoulder and says, hey, I want you to go back to that African king who thinks he's a god. This is God's issue with Pharaoh. People always ask, and I think the elementary Bible student always says, why would God harden Pharaoh's heart? It doesn't seem nice. Like, wouldn't God just say, Pharaoh, let my people go? And that's a very good question, because that's what God told the other Pharaoh with Abraham and Sarah. He says, hey, bro, I ain't going to have no long talking with you. You better let the man's wife go right now. The man wakes up and says, oh, God, I didn't know. I'll let her go right now. God could have definitely done that. But by the time we get to Moses, okay, we have 2,000 years of Egyptian cultural, not anthropological, cultural evolution. We have the evolution of their entire theosphere, I call it, the theosphere, their pantheon of gods. They are worshiping, they're pantheists. For those who don't know the word, it is basically the ingraining of God in nature. They're worshiping the Nile. They're worshiping the frogs. They're worshiping the flies. They have this pantheon of gods, of which Pharaoh sits at the very top. Pharaoh, at the time, the black man in Africa, that Egyptian king, that emperor, operating in a prehistoric period with technological advances. He has bronze chariots. When everybody else is fighting with wood, Africans are being able to smelt bronze. Come on, man. Come on, baby. We're in a prehistoric era. They're eating their meat raw in Europe. Africans are living in ziggurats, able to smelt metal, able to mummify bodies, able to do brain surgery. Look it up. These individuals are extremely advanced. They're architects, they're physicists. They know irrigation. Jeez. They are Bronze Age people living in a prehistoric realm. And this black man, because of his technological advances over all of the other empires, thinks he's God. God says, go tap him on the shoulder. Go tap your cousin on the shoulder and tell that black man that your God said, let my people go. Family business. This black bushman He's a bushman now. Trinidad people know what a bushman is. A bushman is an individual who doesn't live in civilized places. He lives, off of the land, right? He probably smell like his goat. He walking in there. He's not well kept, right? He's living off the land, but he's strong like an ox because he's cutting down trees, and he's living hard, So this bushman, this old bushman, walks up to this king, this black king. This black old man walk up to this black king and says, "Hey, remember me? You remember me, right? I'm Moses. I'm in the annals. I'm written on the hieroglyphics. You see me here? This is another thing too. Most people say, and these are our atheist agnostics, our scholastic agnostics, say, oh, there's no record. There's no record of a Moses being in Egypt. When we look at how the hieroglyphic historicity of Egypt, we have no record of him. Boy, everybody will jump. The European Jew, everybody will come to fight that battle. They'll be like, don't even try that nonsense. If Moses doesn't exist, boy, if there was no such person as Moses, I ain't gonna go there. That's a whole nother story. I can dive into that later. When Moses walks up to the brother, taps him on the shoulder and says, hey, you've got to let the God of my fathers, let him go. And this black man says, no. When God wants to make this man think, no, you are not a God. This is the whole conversation. This is the whole thing happening. This is the whole thing that's going on here. This whole thing. This is why this conversation about God, religion, and race has always been on the tongue of Afro-Semitic and Afro-Hamitic people. This is what the fight has always been about. This is what the struggle has always been about. This is the ancient war. The ancient wars of men of color fighting about land and fighting about the domination of their God. Whose God is greater? Part 2. This is part 2. There has always been two Israels. Always. There has been the Israel that worships God properly, and there has been the Israel that worships God improperly. So let's fast forward to current day. We still have a race problem, absolutely, because we have this conversation going on between European Jews and going on between Afro-Semitic Israelites, Hebrews, who say, hey, this thing is still messy. Not only do we have a problem with your ancestral claims, we have a problem with your religious practices. Is this new? No. This has been an old conversation with the Hebrew, with the Israelite. It's an old conversation. Arriving in the northern kingdom is a gentleman by the name of Elijah the Tishbite. Elijah comes to show the northern kingdom, Israel, under the auspices of that evil lady Jezebel and her husband who doesn't understand he doesn't understand that he has to follow the laws of God. That crazy king who allows this woman to come into the kingdom and change around the pantheon of worship. Elijah arrives and says, what is wrong with Israel right now? Well, who do you understand what who you're supposed to be worshiping? Two Israels. And he says, if Baal is God, worship him. And if Yahweh be God, worship him. Two Israels. It's always been the case. It didn't begin there with Ahab's kingdom. It began with Jeroboam's kingdom. If you look at the etymology of the word Jeroboam, and who is Jeroboam? After David's kingdom, after David's death, Solomon takes his place. We know Solomon is the only time that Israel was a world empire. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam takes his place. But the kingdom is cut in two. And Jeroboam receives the northern kingdom. They follow him because Rehoboam he's too insolent. He doesn't have enough humility to ingratiate himself to the northern tribes. And he says something very foul, very foul. If you read that scripture, he says something terribly foul to them. He basically talks about his private parts and says, listen, you think my father was a big man? Listen, and I'll let you read that for yourself. It doesn't say it expressly, but if you read it, he's talking about his private parts. He's basically talking that his private parts are bigger than anybody out there. It's a very insulting thing he says. Anyway, the kingdom is cut in half, and Jeroboam, his name means this: may the people increase. That's what Jeroboam means. May the people increase. Interesting. Any religion that is led by people is a false religion. Any movement that is led by a man who is not following God's instruction is a false movement. Jeroboam sets up a false system of religion in Samaria. He has new priests. He has a new system of worship. He tells the Israelite there's no need to travel to Shiloh. There's no need to go down there and worship, because he knows if they go down there and worship, he might lose some of them. And he sets up a false system of worship. There's always been two Israels, right? They're worshiping a false god in Samaria, and they're worshiping the true God with Judah and Benjamin. And this is the question that I asked Harry. I said, Harry, when the 10 tribes were taken, who was taken? Right? Because we know there's 10. There's 12 rather. And I said, he said, the 10 tribes. I said, tell me the tribes that were not taken. If you go back and listen to the interview with Harry, who was not taken? He says, well, Judah and Benjamin, they weren't taken. I believe that's how he says it. I said, oh, so Levi was taken. And he corrects himself. He's like, well, I guess there's 13 tribes. The fact of the matter is that the Levites were taken. That Levitical worship was affected. But as he mentions, oh Lord, as he mentions, there is a Levitical presence also in the southern kingdom. So watch this. This is what this means. That if the 10 tribes, as the Hebrew Israelites say, were taken, and they are part of the 10 tribes, Levi was taken, part of the Levitical tradition was taken, meaning that true worship, the true customs of Israel that were still intermingled in the north, even though they were following a false system at the time. True customs were still there. In the south, they also had Levites. This means something very simple. Oh, jeez. Change my... Where am I going? I'm in a lot of fog here, so I can't even see nothing. Where am I going? Oh, boy. I've traveled so far. I am so dumb. Okay, let me turn around. I got all caught up talking to you guys. I'm traveling. I'm going someplace where I'm not even supposed to be going. Look, where the heck am I? Boy. Anyway. So there is a dichotomy of the northern tribes being taken away with some of their religious traditions, and yes, because they were not worshiping God. Later on, the southern tribes were taken away. Again, why? Because they're not worshiping God. God's pretty consistent. You don't worship me properly, I'm going to let you be obliterated. Period. This is what Deuteronomy 28 and 68 means to the Hebrew Israelite. And this is why they can say, listen, this is why we had this situation. We did not follow the religion of our fathers. And God allowed this to happen to us. But now if we return to that faith, God will return to us. This is why these men and women have adopted this approach to a lifestyle after God. But this is what I appreciate about the Hebrew Israelite cause. Unlike their northern brothers, unlike their European peers, they do believe, they truly do believe that Yeshua is Messiah. They believe that Yeshua is Messiah. That is my understanding of the Hebrew Israelite that I have sat down and talked to. And I've talked to them for very many years. I've had this is not something that I picked up in a book. This is direct contact with Hebrew Israelites. Hebrew Israelites teach out of the New Testament probably more than the Old. When I listen to Hebrew Israelites do most of their teaching, most of it's out of the New Testament. I'm an Old Testament preacher, me personally. I'm a Christian that's an Old Testament preacher because I see how God is giving us the parallels of the Old and the New Testament. So I'm an Old Testament dude. For those who don't know me, I run a seminary for years, and I have detailed Old Testament study that I've done. Those who listen to me, they know I'm an Old Testament preacher. But the Hebrew Israelites, they embrace Yeshua. You call him something a little different. Can I get into that? I want to get into that. There's a difference between a name and a construction. Let me explain that to you. So my full name, that my mother named me after a man from Trinidad named Wendell Muttley. But I've rarely let people call me by my full name because most people, especially y'all Americans with your drawl, they say Wendell. And when I was a little boy, I used to slap kids for not saying my name properly. So I said, let me stop slapping people and just give them half the name. Dell. Just call me Dell because my name is Wendell. In Trinidad, you say Wendell. Or you'll say Wendell. So Wendell is actually a German name. And in German, it's pronounced Wandel. The name actually means wanderer. That is the actual meaning of the German word Wandel. Right? Let's do the same thing with Jesus. The name Jesus is the English translation of a Greek word, iosis. That is a translation of the Hebrew word, Yeshua. All three words mean Yahweh is salvation, right? There is many ways in the Hebrew to say that, to say Yahweh is salvation. Some of the words that are used to represent Christ are constructions. It would be like somebody coming up to me and saying, Wanderer, good morning. What do you mean, Wanderer? My name is Wendell. What do you mean, Wendell? Your name means wanderer, so I'm calling you the construction. I'm calling you the meaning. But that's not my name. There's the meaning of my name, and there's my name. There is the Germanic pronunciation of my name, and then there's my name. If somebody called me Wandel, I'd be like, my name is Wendell. No. In German, you are Wandel. It is a German name, though I will call you Wandel. And I guess a German can do that. So there's differences in constructions. There's differences in respect to the etymological translation of a name in its original form, and then there's the name, right? So with Jesus, you find that people are saying Yeshua, and there's people who say Yehoshua. Yehoshua is a construction. That's all I'm saying. But y'all can call him anything you want. I just wanted to bring that part up. But what is this? It's family business. The whole conversation is family business. Okay, there's a whole lot in here. Christian doctrine came out of the Edomite. Oh, isn't that interesting? That's nice. Christian doctrine. Let's talk about Christian doctrine. All right. I saw Bishop Nathaniel. He came on and he gave a speech last night. He spoke last night, and I agree with what he said. I agree with what he said. I agree with what Bishop. If you're going to ask about Hebrew Israelites, you should ask a Hebrew Israelite. He's right about that. He's 100% right. Nobody should speak for you in respect to your religion, other than people who, embody your religion. And he's a bishop in the Hebrew Israelite cause, and therefore, if you're asking about a Hebrew Israelite, you should talk to him. But if you're going to talk about Christianity, you got to talk to us. And so I'll tell you where Christianity came from. Christianity is, I don't know what that was. Edomite? Like, what is that, bro? First of all, Christianity, and we're not talking about just biblical Christianity. Let's move from there, because that's easy to figure out. We have, Jewish men and Israelite men who adapted the following of who they believe to be the Messiah, and therefore to them, Christianity for them is Reformed Judaism. That's what they see it as, Reformed Judaism. And the Jerusalem Council, the first Jerusalem Council, which you can see in the Bible in the book of Acts, the first dilemma was to figure out, what do we do with the Gentiles? How do we make the Gentiles worship different than the Jews? If we are all one now, because the race problem has been solved, that's what the Christian church decided. You're what? You're guaranteed to never succeed following false idols. Okay. That's all right, bro. I agree with you. Don't follow no false idols. Follow Christ. The race problem being solved, the Semitic men had to figure out, how are we going to deal with the Gentiles? And the Jerusalem Council figured that out. And you can go read it for yourself and see what they decided. I'm going to send you back to the Bible yourself. But so the church now, as it extrapolates itself into two versions of Rome, Roman aggression to the church prior to 325 AD, the church becomes very protectionist in respect to how it's delineating its message. It's spreading all over the world. This rampant religion is spreading all over the world through various sources, right? For those who don't know, the Apostle Thomas is out in India, and we know John is being taken all over the place, and we know Paul is going all over the place. And so from the initial 12 plus Paul and their disciples, this thing is now spreading. And so we arrive in the 4th century with Constantinian oversight of the Byzantine Empire, aka Rome, who is now converted. His mother is converted, her name is Helen, and he's converted. And he now is trying to figure out what Christianity is. And he calls for one bishop, Bishop Alexander, to come and to explain to the most holy faith, to the Roman Empire. It's what his wording is. And he calls for Alexander to come, and because the church is in disarray, and there's so many different versions of what the Christian believes in the 4th century, yes there is, I'm honest enough to say it, some factions don't want Alexander's version to be what is taught to the empire, and they kill him. They kill him. I don't know who kills him, but it's probably members of the church. And then Constantine says, you know what, forget this. I'm going to call not just one, I'm calling everybody. And he sets out a letter, and he gives 2 years for the bishops all over the world. He invites every bishop in the world in the five patriarchal places of Christianity: Constantinople, Rome, Antioch, Jerusalem. Constantinople, Rome, Antioch, Jerusalem, and where? This is where I'm going. Africa, Alexandria. And Alexandria, let's not call it what it's been colonized as, Africa, Egypt. Alexandria is where the greatest minds of the church are. The greatest minds are in Africa. are in Egypt. The greatest minds, the most brilliant guys are in Alexandria. And in Alexandria, there's a fight going on about who else? Who else are they going to fight about? Jesus. Who is he? Is he God? Is he kind of like God? Or is he just a man? And there's a brilliant black man, a black priest, who's very, very wrong, but he's very, very brilliant. His name is Arius. Not to be mistaken with Arians. And this is why you folks, and this is why I made this statement, many of you who do not understand history say nonsense. Arius is not an Aryan. Arius is a black man in Egypt who is a priest, who is a brilliant priest, and comes up with a concept of who Christ is. He says Jesus is homo iousis. Homo iousis. The I is the concept of just an iota. We have this phrase, it's off by an iota. This is where they get this I. Homo iousis means he is of like substance, meaning he's not God, but he is like God. He's close, but he's not quite God. This is what Arius is saying. And why is Arius saying? Is it because he's demonic or no? Arius is trying to protect the divinity of the Father. That's his intention, right? That's his theological intention. His heart's in the right place, but he's very wrong. So the church now, the 300 other bishops who show up, led by another African, strong African bishop who's from Alexandria, who's also named Alexander. Bishop Alexander refutes with a couple of other individuals, Bishop Nicholas, who is the famous person known for slapping Arius in his face, another black man from Constantinople, who now goes on to be referred to as Saint Nick, Saint Nicholas, right? You know that, you know who that is, right? Santa Claus. Tell the kids Santa Claus is black too. It's the truth, it's Santa Claus. Saint Nicholas, the Constantinople bishop, was a brother. Santa Claus black too. So Alexander, this hurts some people's feelings, boy. Alexander argued against Arius and said, Jesus is not homo iousis. Jesus is homoousias. Famous word, famous terminology, framed in 200 AD by a gentleman by the name of Sabellius. The church actually fought against his teachings, but they embraced this one word. And homoousias, I might be on time today. Homoousias means of the same substance. That Jesus and the Father are indivisible. They are of the same substance. This lesson was taught for this purpose and this reason. Because I don't need to convert nobody. It was taught to show you that the people who are arguing this were Africans. Where'd I start? Family business! This is family business. These major doctrines came out of the think tank. This is what Bishop Al Sampson said of today, of this era, that we don't have think tanks anymore. In the 60s, they had think tanks where black men, look who he said he went to school with. He went to school with Farrakhan. He went to school with Jesse Jackson. He went to school, he sat at the feet of King. We don't have think tanks anymore because you Negroes want to fight with people when we should be sitting down talking family business. That's where I was going with this conversation. Why can't I sit down with the Hebrew Israelite? Why can't I sit down with the Nation of Islam and sit down with the black Christian and sit down even with the black Palestinian and say, brothers, this is family business. We all have the same problem. We all have the same issue. We're all having the same dilemma. Let's, as a family, go and sit down with these gentlemen who worship the same God that we want to worship for the most part, because some of us have a difference, right? Muslims are a little bit different. And have a conversation about how we think they're addressing us. It's family business. It's family business. It's always been family business. You know what the greatest distraction of the black man of the current era is? His theological pride. You up here arguing about whose God is right, whose ways are right. You up here arguing about that. You know that's not your argument. It's not your argument. It's never been your argument. It's never been your argument. Elijah said it like this: let the God who is God answer by fire. Your job is to take your message to whom you think your message is supposed to go to and let God answer. You fighting over God? When Gideon threw down that doggone idol, and they came to get Gideon because they threw down the idol, his daddy said, listen, what did he throw down? He threw our gods down, and we want him. We want to grab him right now. He said, no. If he threw down your gods, let your God come get him. Let your God come get him. Listen, if you're a real believer, let God talk for your faith. But we have some family business right now that we need to sit down. Don't come on here arguing me about my faith. That's like me running around arguing, telling you about your faith. I can only tell you the history. The Gentiles sit down with each other. It's called the United Nations. Talk that truth like an Exodus. When pride is involved, rather than focusing on salvation, that's what you get. Of course, we can all sit down with each other. We are family by bloodline. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's family business. And what I'm trying to say is that family, we have a much bigger issue right now than our doctrinal differences, because our doctrinal differences will be decided by God. And the Jew and the Christian, according to even the Bible that I read, one day will be reconciled together, because Paul said it first. He said that blindness has come onto Israel so that the Gentiles could come in. So if you even adhere to that, there is a reason that we don't agree. There's a reason that we don't agree. There's a reason. And that reason is so that God could get all of us. There's a reason we don't agree. There's a reason when you read Revelation 7 that there's two factions in that conversation. Read it for yourself, Revelation 7. There's a faction of Jews, 144,000, and then there's a faction that no man can number. And God is ultimately bringing those factions together. But right now, we have family business to discuss with individuals who are talking about our ancestry. Listen to me. If I didn't like you folks, if I had an issue with doctrine, why am I sitting here defending Hebrew Israelite cause? I've said it many times, I'm not a Hebrew Israelite. So why am I so angry that the Hebrew Israelite is on the ADL's list of hate groups? Because it's family business. You guys know this. You guys know this. You can have a fight with your brother and sister, a drag out fight, punching and scratching. You want to kill them. But don't let some stranger from across the street talk crazy about your family. You will switch around, be like, wait, hey, that's my brother, that's my sister, you can't talk to them like that. You were just fighting with them just yesterday. That's our business. You don't come out here talking. I will drag you. Don't ever talk about my sister like that. Are you out of your mind? That's how we are. That's how we are. And that's why I'll defend them. That's why I'll come to their, I'm not saying they need my help. I never said that the nation, that the Hebrew Israelite nation and Israelite groups need my help. I never said they needed my help. I'm not saying that you need my help. Bishop Nathaniel, brother, you're doing a great job. You're a general. But it's still my fight. family business. To all of my subscribers and members, I'd like to thank all of you. We're playing catch up. I'm hoping that everything that I promised, I want to be able to hold on to things and say, this show is sponsored by this business. Some of you are still not getting me your emails, so I can't. I'm trying. I want to. I really want to be able to just talk about your businesses right now. Okay? Here we go. If they come for us, they're coming for you. That's right. Because you may be and don't know it. It could be. It might be. The video on this constructive thinking can spread. Yes. I agree. Moses was a black man. Yes, he was. Hence the reason he did not stand out in Egypt. Yes, he was. All praises to Christina Hill. All right. I got to check what. Stop being a distraction. I'm not sure what that was for. It's very deep. I hope you liked it. I wanted to talk about family business. And there's one thing that, and I'm going to close because I'm here and I'm on time. Well, kind of. This is why hermeneutics is important. Homiletics and hermeneutics. Homiletics is how to structure a message. All right? I'm going to brag. I'm a homiletic expert. Because I know where my point is and I know how to bring it home. Hermeneutics is a science of how to put theological thought together to bring about a conclusive decision by everybody so everybody can say amen. Homiletics and hermeneutics are important. And the homiletics of this are we have to structure a message to the ADL, to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and to all those that would speak against us. We have to structure a message so that they will forever know this is family business. Don't talk about these people. Just like right now, everybody in the media is afraid to talk about Jews. I'm saying this to people, I'm going to say this to everybody. We have to make sure that people are afraid to talk about us. Family business. Coming to Chicago. When I come to Chicago, I want to see every red-blooded black man of every ethnicity. I want to see every one of you show up with me because I'm going to Chicago to talk about family business. You guys have a good day. I'm going to be in touch with you. This is Del K. Brereton. I hope you liked it. Subscribe, like, and share this video. We got to talk about some family business. We'll talk later. Good morning to everybody. I'm going to tell you where I'm going to be at in Chicago, but I'm not going to say it yet because I don't want people jumping the gun. But I'm going to be in Chicago, and I'll tell you exactly where, right? Let me get into America first. Let me make sure they don't put me on a no-fly list. Let me get in there first, and then I'll tell you where I'm going to be. All right? I don't want people planning ahead of me. So I'm not going to tell you yet. When I land in America, I will tell you where I'm going to be, right? It's next week, though. I'll be in Chicago next week. Bless you. Bye-bye.